And I don't want to make it overcomplicated because it is a complicated subject. That's why we actually have people specializing within sustainability, because you really got to start understanding how multifaceted it is. One of the terms used as shorthand for sustainability is ESG. And please, I am not conflating ESG with sustainability. That's one of my bugbears. But so if you look at ESG, I mean, even that, right? All the topics that we cover when we talk about an E agenda and an S agenda and a G agenda, each of them are quite complicated and would require a person to spend a lot of time to understand. But putting them together and understanding how they actually relate to each other, and therefore towards, sort of moving towards more sustainable outcomes, you can see is not an easy task. But we can start with the basics around we function within a planet of finite resources. There are planetary boundaries that regulate the functioning of the Earth systems. And if we want to keep a stable operating context and a livable planet, we need to understand that we've got to operate within the context of those boundaries. We also then need to meet basic societal foundations, and that we need to meet the basic needs of society within the context of these planetary boundaries. And does that trickle through? I mean, how much of that do we understand? I would argue that should be basic knowledge for all of us, right? To just understand we operate in the system. What does that system need? How does that system work? And therefore, our life is actually dependent on that system. Our livelihoods are dependent on that system. And by the way, we have a responsibility to ensure, adequate social foundations within the context of these boundaries. One of those that sort of trickled down a bit more easily has been that of climate change. And what is that? The boundary there is the CO2 capacity, absorptive capacity of the earth, and of the operating context that we have. And so that's translated into saying we've transgressed that boundary. We know now that we're functioning outside of that limitation, and most of these boundaries have been quantified. So I encourage people to go understand what planetary boundaries are. What does that mean in terms of just general life? We, like I said, the easier one, because it's been quantified perhaps better than the others, and we have more knowledge around it, and that is the CO2 boundary. But there are many others. There's nitrogen oxide, there's fresh water systems. There are a few others that we really need to understand. And over the last period of probably a decade, we've actually moved into breach on a number of those. And this should be deeply concerning for each of us, because that does affect and impact our life as we know it and our life going into the future. We talk about a climate emergency, but there are a number of other emergencies happening at the same time.